Parents promised to pay for my college tuition, but secretly used the entire money to cover my brother's gambling debts. And when I confronted them, they threatened to disown me completely if I revealed the truth to anyone ever. I was 25 when everything I believed I knew about my family fell apart. My name is Aaron Blake, and I grew up in a small town just outside of Columbus, Ohio. My parents, Martin and Lisa, always said that school was the one thing they could do for me that they never had. My father worked in a parts factory for almost 30 years, and my mother ran a small beauty salon from our home. My brother Evan is 5 years older than me at 30, and for most of my life, I thought of him as the golden child. He was loud, confident, always knew how to talk himself out of trouble. I was the introvert, the kid who stayed inside, read books, got decent grades, and never got into trouble. Save your energy for college, Aaron, they told me for years. We've been saving for you since the day you were born. That was a sentence that was almost a family motto. I remember opening my very first acceptance letter from Ohio State, and Mom hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. My father told me, "We're proud of you, son. We'll take care of everything." I didn't even bother to apply for financial aid because why would I? They told me that they had a tuition fund set aside, about $50,000 if I remember right. Money from some old insurance settlement and proceeds from Grandma's estate. Everything was fine until 2 weeks before the semester started. I walked into the kitchen that morning, and my mom was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and this look on her face like she hadn't slept all night. She said, "Aaron, honey, something's happened to the college fund." I thought she meant a bank delay or paperwork issue. I asked her what's wrong, and she just kept staring down into her mug. My father then entered, sat down next to her, and informed me of something which did not even register at first. He stated, "We needed to spend some of the money," and upon asking how much, he replied, "All of it." I recall laughing, believing he was joking, but he wasn't. I could feel something drop within me. He said Evan's been having some trouble, that he'd gotten mixed up with some guys in town, borrowed money he couldn't pay back, and they were pressuring him. They used my college fund to settle his debts. I didn't even know Evan gambled. I thought he had a job at the car dealership. Dad swore he'd make it up somehow, but the semester began in 2 weeks. I didn't have any money for tuition, for books, for anything. I was attempting not to get hysterical, but my voice started trembling. I said, "That money was mine. You promised." Dad's face hardened, as if he didn't like being challenged. He said, "We did what we had to do. Family first." I said, "I'm family too." Mom started crying but didn't say a word. Evan wasn't even home. He was probably asleep or out pretending like everything was okay. I remember bursting out, walking over to the park, sitting on the cold bench, trying to breathe. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called Evan. He didn't answer. I texted him, told him I knew. He didn't get back to me until an hour later, just said, "I'm sorry, bro, I didn't have a choice." That was it. No explanation. No effort to make it right. Nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept replaying it all back. All the birthday cards that said, "We're so proud of you." All the times they said, "Study hard, we'll take care of the rest." It all felt like a lie. The following morning, I visited Evan's apartment. It was a mess. Beer cans, stacks of clothes, that sour smell of old takeout. He opened the door, eyes red, half hungover. I asked him why he did it. He said, "I just needed a little help. I was gonna pay it back." He didn't even look sorry. I said, "You destroyed my future." He said, "Oh, come on, it's not that serious. You can take a loan, right?" That's when I knew he didn't get it. None of them did. To them, I was the easy one, the quiet one who'd never fight back. I left and drove straight to the factory. Dad was still at work. I waited by the gate until he came out. He was exhausted, dirty, as ever. I told him I couldn't forgive him. He said, "You'll understand someday when you have a family." I said, "No, I won't." I said, "You didn't save your son. You just picked your favorite." He turned and walked away without a word. I stood and watched him leave. The man I'd spent my whole life trying to make proud. I tried to get things sorted out for the next few weeks. I applied for scholarships, grants, part-time work. I emailed Ohio State's financial aid office, explained what had happened. They said it was too late for that semester, but that I could defer until the following one. I was mortified. I had to go back to my old room, the one where the posters were peeling off the wall and the bed creaked, while my brother was still driving around in his new truck like nothing had happened. When I was with my parents, it was just uncomfortable silence. Mom would ask if I'd eaten. Dad would act like he was watching TV. No one ever mentioned the money. It was like this unspoken thing between us. Then Evan came over for dinner one night. He brought wine as if he was doing them a favor. During dinner, I asked him again if he'd paid back any of what he owed them. "No, things were still tight," he said. I said, "So I lose everything and you just move on?" He lost his temper, said, "Stop being dramatic, it's just money. My father told me to let it be. I did not." I told him, "It's my life, Father. You traded my future to save him from his own stupidity." That's when my father slammed his fist on the table and told me, enough. He pointed at me and told me, you ever talk about this outside of this house? You're no son of mine. He looked me straight in the eye, and I saw something in him that I'd never seen. Not disappointment, fear. He was afraid of people knowing. From that night, I didn't eat with them anymore. I worked extra shifts at a warehouse down the street, saved every dollar I could, didn't talk to Evan at all. He still sent texts from time to time trying to make small talk, but I couldn't even look at his name without feeling sick. Mom would come into my room sometimes, sit on the edge of the bed and say, please don't hate us, we had no choice. I'd say, why didn't you tell me the truth? She'd say, because you'd have tried to stop us. She was right. I would have. Months passed like that. I missed the fall semester, then the spring one too. By then, I was working full-time, exhausted, bitter, but too proud to ask for help from anyone. One day, my old high school teacher, Mr. Lee, saw me at the supermarket. He asked what had happened with college. I lied, said I deferred for a year to save up. He smiled and said, good choice. I concurred, but my throat was tight. I had to tell someone, anyone, but my dad's words still echoed in my head. You say a word about this, you're no son of mine. I sat in my car that evening in front of the plant, just staring at the door. I thought about all the years Dad had worked inside those walls, working to give us something better, and how, in the end, he used it all to tidy up Evan's mess. I thought about leaving town, cutting them off completely, but some part of me still couldn't. I still loved them, even though I hated what they had done. It's funny how love can survive betrayal like that. It doesn't disappear, it just hurts. I did not plan to go back home after that night, but life does not move in straight lines. 8 months or thereabouts later, I was settled in a small one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, barely able to pay rent, working 6 days a week in a hardware store. I had stopped calling my parents and they had not called me. The silence had become a kind of understanding among us. Still, I'd think about Mom every now and then when I'd pass the bakery that was her favorite, or when I'd see a father and his kid out for a walk. Something within me missed what we used to be. Then, on a Sunday morning, I got a call from her. Her voice was shaking. She said, your father's in the hospital. Heart attack. My first reaction was this weird mix of panic and anger. I hadn't seen him in almost a year, but that still felt like a punch in the gut. I headed straight to St. Luke's. I came into his room, and he looked smaller, weaker. Tubes, machines, the beeping. Mom was sitting next to him, holding his hand. She looked up and started crying. Dad opened his eyes, looked at me for a moment, and I thought he'd turn away, but he didn't. He said, hey, son. His voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and sat down. Nobody spoke for a while. The room was heavy with all the things we hadn't said. Then Mom spoke up. He wanted to see you. Dad looked at me and said, I know I hurt you, Aaron. I just didn't know what else to do. I said to him, you could have been honest with me. You could have trusted me. He closed his eyes and whispered, I was trying to protect him, and I thought I was protecting you too. I said to him, from what? From reality? He didn't say anything. He just stared at the ceiling. When the nurse came in, I left. I walked out into the hallway, my chest constricting. All those nights I hated him, and there he was lying in bed hooked up to machines, and I couldn't even say whether I wanted him to live or die. That kind of guilt doesn't feel human. It feels like poison. He was discharged a week later. I drove Mom home because she had no energy. The house felt the same but colder somehow. Evan was there. He had a beard and the same sloppy smile he always had. He said, hey man, long time no see. I didn't even look at him. Mom said, please, not now. The four of us sat in silence eating soup that Mom had heated up from the freezer. Dad finally said, we need to talk about the money. My chest got tight again. He said, I told Evan he has to pay you back. Evan's spoon halted midway to his mouth. He said, I said I'm working on it. Dad said, you've been working on it for over a year. Mom started crying again, said she couldn't take this. I stood up and said, it doesn't matter anymore. Just forget it. But Dad said, no, it does matter. I should have gotten it right, and I didn't. I could read the guilt written all over him. For the first time, I didn't get angry. I just felt tired. That night, when I was leaving, Mom walked me to the door. She said, I know you don't trust us, but we love you. I said, love isn't supposed to hurt like this. She didn't argue. She just looked at me with eyes older than I remembered. On the way home, I could not help but keep thinking about Dad's words, about protecting us. Maybe he thought paying off Evan's debt would save the family name. Maybe he thought people would talk, but all he managed to do was destroy the one thing that mattered, trust. I got accepted into a community college program 2 months later. It wasn't Ohio State, but it was something. I paid for it myself. I worked during the day, studied at night. It was hard, but it made me feel in control again. I started to feel like I was creating something that nobody could ever take away. Mom would text me sometimes, small things like, proud of you, or miss you. I'd answer with short answers. I still couldn't open the door all the way, not yet. Then, one night, I got a text from Evan. He texted, "Need to talk, it's important." I didn't answer, but he called twice. When I picked up, his voice was shaking. He said, "I messed up again." My stomach fell. He said, "I need help." I said, Don't even ask." He said, "Please, it's bad this time." I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. Half of me wanted to help. The other half said, let him clean up his own mess. The next morning, Mom called. She was crying again. She said, "Evan got arrested. Gambling again." I didn't even feel surprised, just empty. I went to see him at the county jail. He looked rough, thinner, eyes hollow. He said, "I know you hate me." I said, "I don't hate you. I just don't believe you'll ever change." He said, "I wish I could." I said, "You can, but you won't." He started crying. I didn't. He said, "I'm sorry about the money, about everything." I said, "Sorry doesn't fix what you've broken." He nodded. Just as I was leaving, he said, "Dad's been visiting me. He's not well." I told him he still blames himself. Evan said, "Yeah." I told him, maybe he should. That night when I got home, I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling. My life had been split into two halves before the truth and after it. Before, I would think my family would always be there for me. Later, I discovered that love does not always equal honesty, and blood does not always equal loyalty. Still, I kept going to see Dad. He was deteriorating. One day he said to me, "I know I can't make it right, but I need you to forgive me." I said, "I'm trying." He smiled, small and weary, said, "That's enough." 3 weeks later, he died. The funeral was small. I gave the eulogy because Mom couldn't. I said I told him he tried, he made mistakes, but he loved us. That wasn't a lie. Evan was sobbing in the back. He came to me afterward and said, "I'm done gambling." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him and said, "For your sake, I hope so." Mom hugged me, and I hugged her back for the first time in years. It didn't fix it all, but it was something. 2 years later now, I'm finishing my degree. I'm still in that same small apartment, still working part-time, but I'm proud of what I've done on my own. I talk to Mom every now and then. Evan's in recovery now. We're not friends, but we're not enemies. Sometimes I drive by the old house, the porch light's still on, like it always was. It reminds me of everything we lost and everything I had to rebuild. My father's words still echo in my mind every now and then. "You'll understand someday when you have a family." Maybe he was right. Maybe someday I will. But if I ever do have a child, I'll make sure they never have to learn love from betrayal.